This is a video about integrating sources using MLA citation. So for assignment 4, the seeing paper, we're thinking about integrating our language with the language of others, specifically as a bridge between WRD 103 and WRD 104, where you are doing more research-based learning. You're thinking about other people's language and using it into your own. So by the end of this video, we should be able to understand and learn how we integrate quotes into our own language, kind of understand how quotes are used to analyze in our writing, and then also how to format and construct in MLA citation as well. So the primary feature of the quote is what I refer to as a quotation sandwich. So a sandwich has a piece of bread on top, something in between, and then a piece of bread on the bottom as well. So the top layer ends up being the signal phrase, and this is the language that kind of tells the reader we're moving from your language into someone else's. We then have the quotation itself, and then finally, and probably the most important part, is the analysis, is the following up after the quotation to explain why the quotation you've used is significant within your writing as well. A couple of things about quotes. First of all, kind of use as little quotes as possible when you can. Although we all know that it's an easy way to kind of fill up word counts with a paper and things like that. Ultimately, the reader is looking for your language. So keeping quotes to a minimum allows more room to fully explain the significance of the quote and keeps your voice the dominant voice in the paper as well. And this is a common pitfall for Essay 4, where it ends up people rely heavily on someone else's language to explain out what they're trying to say as well. Explaining the quotation. This is often what writers will do, is they'll put a quote in there and they'll assume that because the reader has read it, they don't necessarily need to explain why it's significant. So don't just assume that they've read it, that they understand what you're trying to say. And also, for every kind of line of quote that you use, a good rule of thumb is try to shoot for 2 to 3 lines of your own analysis and explanation out there. And that also helps to keep your language the dominant language of the quotation itself. Now, for longer quotes, and this is specifically for when you're doing a standard 12-point font, double-spaced, we'll do it. I'll also at the very end of the video show you how to handle a block quotation within Digication itself. But anything over about 4 lines of quote must be formatted as a block quotation. And basically what happens is that visually you kind of lose where the quote ended and where it began and where it ends as well. So it needs to be introduced with a colon. Each line needs to be indented 2 tab spaced length. The quote does not require quotation marks in it, and the parenthetical citation, and again that's the thing at the very end between the parentheses, is included outside of the final punctuation. And also keep in mind that again, even if you're supposed to use quotations sparingly, use block quotations even more sparingly. So for example, we see here that we have this signal phrase right here with a colon that indicates we're moving into the block quotation. We have the tab spaces in that gives us the quotation itself right here. There are no quotation marks on either end. There is a terminal punctuation, but the parenthetical citation is outside of that as well. Don't let quotations kind of stand alone in a sentence. This is oftentimes what people end up doing, is they'll literally just kind of drop quotations into the text. It'll have no signal phrase, it won't have any analysis afterwards, and they're just kind of assuming, oh, well, they read it now, so they'll understand it. Remember that the reader is looking for your insight and kind of why the quotation is significant as well. So anytime you analyze a quotation, you need to kind of answer the so what question. Now the quotation might interpret or analyze or explain information that you've included. It might examine some consequences, result in implications, ramifications of your information. It might clarify any ambiguous information, might make clear why your reader should be concerned, or relate back explicitly to your thesis or argument that you're making within the paper itself. Kind of once you've selected the quotes that support your idea, proper citation of the source is important in order to avoid plagiarism. And again, in Western civilization, we think that idea ends up meaning that quotations can end up being kind of possess. So that part of it is that we want to give attribution to any time we're using an idea that we've gotten from somewhere else. So a good rule of thumb whenever you're doing a citation is like, when in doubt, provide a citation. That's a good way to kind of prevent, you're sure that you won't actually end up kind of making a mistake as well. Some kind of basic in-text kind of format as well. Remember with MLA, you end up going to use the author's name, the page number that it came from. If it is a print copy, if it's an electronic copy with no page number, then you would exclude it as well, with no comma in between it, so that you end up having the signal phrase, the quote, and then the parenthetical. But you can also change this around as well. So it may end up being that you have the beginning of the quote, a signal phrase that's put into the middle, and then the parenthetical, or even kind of a verse of that as well. Again, some sources may or may not have authors or page name. Use the available resources to determine how to alter it. The Purdue OWL in-text, which I provided as a link for this assignment, is an excellent one. The St. Martin's Handbook chapter that I provided is also a good link for that as well. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. I'm going to stop for just a second and show you how to handle a block quotation in digitation, so I'll be back in just a moment. So again, as we've all kind of realized, there's a challenge with digitation, is that it doesn't have a tab movement, so it's hard to do kind of block quotations. So I have a quote here in digitation, and I'll show you how to handle it. There's also a kind of feature in digitation that makes it a little bit easier as well. So I have up here, this is my signal phrase that's going to let me know where I'm going. So here in conclusion, let's move down here. In conclusion of Lord of the Flies, Ralph and the other boys realize the horror of their actions. So that's the signal phrase. We have a colon that indicates still that they were moving into the block quotation itself. We have the period outside the parenthetical citation with no quotation marks. Now what I do here is, if I highlight this in digitation and go up here, there is the little quotation kind of block up here in the toolbar. I click on that, and it does indent it a little bit and gives a little gray line here. And so this is how you should handle block quotations in digitation. All right, I hope this was helpful.